On a flight bound for Thailand, a monk notices something terrifying. Wherever a flight attendant walks, a trail of bloody footprints appears out of nowhere. What exactly is happening? To cut costs, a Thai airline buys an old passenger plane that was once involved in a serious accident. After repairs and refurbishment, the plane is put back into service. Tonight is the aircraft's first flight since the renovation. Its flight number is 407. While the passengers wait to board, the maintenance crew performs one final inspection. As senior flight attendant Suni walks across the tarmac, the sight of the plane drains the color from her face. 10 years ago, she survived a horrifying plane crash and needed years of therapy before she could return to work. Now, seeing this aircraft brings all those memories rushing back. Maintenance engineer Bank is so busy staring at Suni that he doesn't snap out of it until a coworker teases him by singing a love song. Bank has had feelings for Suni for a long time, and the two of them are about to get married. Once the aircraft passes inspection, the passengers begin boarding. Flight 407 is scheduled to fly from Bangkok to Phuket, a trip of about 1 hour and 15 minutes. Before takeoff, Bank hears a strange noise coming from the cargo hold and climbs inside to investigate. As he bends down to pick something up, a shadow slips past behind him. The cargo door suddenly slams shut from the outside, and no one answers his calls for help over the radio. The captain has no idea Bank is trapped below and takes off on schedule. And just like that, the nightmare begins. After the plane reaches cruising altitude, the crew starts preparing the meals. But one of the meal compartments refuses to open. Suni instinctively gives it a few hard knocks, and the door pops open. The familiar motion reminds her of the flight 10 years ago, when another attendant opened the same kind of compartment in exactly the same way. Suni feels uneasy, but she keeps working. When she crouches down to grab some utensils, she senses someone standing behind her. She turns around and sees a dark figure disappear, but keeps quiet to avoid alarming the others. Suni then walks through the cabin to check on the passengers. The monk and a young girl named Jimmy are sitting near the back, and they see bloody footprints appearing behind Suni with every step she takes. Neither of them dares to say anything, so they try to convince themselves that they imagined it. Meanwhile, a curly-haired young man named Viv goes into the restroom to wash his face. The moment he closes his eyes, a pair of ghostly hands reaches toward him from behind. The plane soon enters an area of turbulence. While the crew tells everyone to remain seated, a bald passenger wanders through the cabin with a blank expression. When an attendant tries to stop him, the veins in his neck bulge, his head twists all the way around, and his eyes roll back until only the whites remain. The man then collapses. But when the crew examines him, they discover that his neck somehow isn't broken. When Viv returns from the restroom, Annie notices a fresh cut on his face. But just as he's about to ask a flight attendant for a bandage, the wound vanishes without a trace. Down in the cargo hold, Bank is growing weaker from the lack of oxygen. The once normal compartment now looks old and abandoned, with rust covering the walls and ghostly figures flickering all around him. At the same time, the cargo hold pressure warning light comes on in the cockpit. The co-pilot goes below to investigate and finds Bank just before he passes out. But when the co-pilot stays behind to continue the inspection, several ghosts suddenly surround him. A scream echoes from the cargo hold. After that, there's nothing but silence. Back in the cabin, everyone is still shaken after watching a passenger become possessed. Hoping to lighten the mood, a flight attendant named Prince announces that Suni and Bank are getting married. Suni helps the injured Bank into a seat, then returns to the galley. A short time later, the missing co-pilot appears in front of Suni. He keeps saying that he needs to see the captain, then walks straight through the locked cockpit door. Suni realizes the co-pilot must already be dead. Meanwhile, passengers throughout the cabin begin screaming as their bodies twist at impossible angles. Bank notices the cabin pressure dropping fast, so he and Suni immediately activate the emergency oxygen system. Wearing an oxygen mask, Suni enters the cabin and finds many of the passengers unconscious. Then a flight attendant who died years ago appears with a battered old service cart, calmly serving the passengers just as she did when she was alive. Suni and Prince move everyone who can still walk into business class and give oxygen to the unconscious passengers. When the others wake up, they're close to panic. Bank explains that the plane's sudden descent caused the cabin pressure to become unbalanced, and the lack of oxygen made them hallucinate. Bank tries to enter the cockpit, but the door won't open even after he enters the code. No one inside responds either. Suni warns everyone that the portable oxygen bags will last only 15 minutes, and if they can't restore cabin pressure, they'll all suffocate. With no other option, Bank takes Suni into the cargo hold to make repairs. The compartment has transformed into something resembling an abandoned warehouse covered in moss and rust. With time running out, Suni holds the light while Bank checks the wiring one line at a time. In business class, the oxygen supply is nearly gone. Jimmy's mother becomes angry at an elderly woman for breathing too quickly and using more oxygen. Jimmy can't stand watching her mother attack the woman, so she argues with her, then breaks down crying in her father's arms. Suddenly, a birthday song begins playing inside the cabin. The battered old service cart appears again, this time carrying a decayed birthday cake. When the music stops, Viv works up the courage to push the cart back into the galley. Just when everyone thinks the danger has passed, Annie's entire body begins to convulse. She stands up and shouts Suni's name, telling her she can't escape her fate and that everyone on the plane is going to die. It's obvious that a ghost has taken control of her. The oxygen in the cabin soon runs out, and several passengers begin losing consciousness. Down in the cargo hold, Suni and Bank are also down to their final oxygen tank. Just before they pass out, Bank manages to repair the pressure system, restoring oxygen throughout the plane. The passengers gradually wake up, but the oldest woman has been without oxygen for too long and dies. Bank and Suni then return to business class. The crisis has barely ended when Jimmy's mother confronts Suni. Annie kept shouting Suni's name while she was possessed, and now the elderly woman is dead. So Jimmy's mother becomes convinced that the ghosts are after Suni. The monk says the plane is filled with powerful resentment and explains that he was a scientist before becoming a monk. Jimmy's mother refuses to listen. She insists that Suni leave business class, and the other passengers agree. Prince brings Bank over, but when Bank realizes no one will change their mind, he accompanies Suni into economy class. All the economy class passengers have already been moved forward, but the moment Bank and Suni enter the empty cabin, they hear eerie laughter coming from between the rows of seats. They quickly retreat to business class as something begins pounding against the outside of the plane, and every light in the cabin goes out. After the ghostly screams finally stop, Prince asks Suni what happened 10 years ago. Suni admits she was a new flight attendant at the time. That flight was also plagued by supernatural events, and passengers and crew members began losing their minds one after another. The plane eventually crashed, and Suni was the only survivor. Flight 407 is actually the rebuilt version of that same aircraft. Once the truth comes out, the ghosts become even more violent. Suni shines her flashlight on the cockpit door and discovers that it's covered in bloody scratch marks. When Viv takes a closer look, he sees the flight attendants who died 10 years ago. Everyone finally understands what the marks are. The attendants left them behind while desperately trying to get inside the cockpit. As the group turns to run, Annie twists her ankle. Viv tries to help her, but she becomes possessed again. Terrified and no longer thinking clearly, Viv punches her to the floor, then grabs a fire extinguisher and repeatedly hits her until she stops moving. Jimmy's mother once again blames Suni. She believes that if they hand Suni over to the ghosts, everyone else will survive. In the middle of the argument, they suddenly realize that Jimmy has disappeared. Bank thinks Jimmy may have hidden in the cargo hold. He also needs to go down there to find a tool that can open the cockpit door, so he takes Suni, Viv, and several others with him. Along the way, Bank asks Suni how she survived the crash 10 years ago. Suni says she only remembers keeping her eyes closed until the plane landed. Elsewhere, Jimmy's mother hears her daughter calling for help, so the monk accompanies her into the cabin to search. As they pass the elderly woman's body, the woman suddenly comes back to life and attacks Jimmy's mother. She breaks free and knocks the woman down with a service cart. Then, another hallucination takes over. Jimmy's mother mistakes the monk for a ghost and rams the cart into him, killing him. In the cargo hold, 3 flight attendants who died years ago suddenly appear. Suni recognizes them as her former co-workers. The group follows the same method Suni used 10 years earlier. They close their eyes and force themselves to ignore the ghosts. By now, Jimmy's mother has completely lost control, and Prince jumps into the cargo hold to escape from her. But the frightened Viv opens his eyes too soon. The moment he sees the ghosts, he grabs an axe and begins swinging wildly. Viv throws the axe at one of the ghostly attendants, but it strikes Prince instead and kills him. Suni explains that the same thing happened 10 years ago. The ghosts manipulated everyone with hallucinations until the passengers and crew began killing one another. The survivors realize that the more frightened they become, the stronger the ghosts get. So instead of running, they laugh and openly challenge them. Once the group stops showing fear, the spirits lose their power and disappear one after another. They then find Jimmy hiding nearby with her eyes tightly closed. Jimmy's mother still sees everyone around her as a ghost. She grabs the axe and prepares to attack, but Bank knocks her unconscious and ties her up with a rope. Bank uses the tool he found to break open the cockpit door, but it still won't move. The group then discovers a narrow passage beside it. No adult can fit through, so they send Jimmy, the smallest person on the plane, inside to press the door release button. When the cockpit finally opens, they discover that the captain is already dead. The windshield is covered with ghosts, and the plane immediately begins plunging toward the ground. In the chaos, Suni finally reveals the full truth. 10 years ago, she was the one who blocked the cockpit door. No matter how desperately her coworkers begged, she refused to let them inside. She even used the door to pin back those who tried to force their way through. Suni sacrificed everyone else to save herself, and the dead have been hunting her ever since. At that moment, Jimmy's mother breaks free from the ropes, tackles Suni, and begins choking her. The plane tilts violently, sending a service cart and loose utensils sliding toward them. Jimmy's mother is pierced by the utensils and dies instantly, while Suni suffers severe injuries and collapses in the galley. With the plane seconds away from crashing, Jimmy's father rushes into the cockpit and pulls up the nose. Bank manages to contact air traffic control, and the two of them prepare for an emergency landing under instructions from the tower. But the ghosts take control of the landing gear, preventing it from lowering. Bank slams his fist against the controls in frustration, and the spirits clinging to the outside of the plane slowly disappear. The aircraft returns to normal and lands safely. After the survivors leave the plane, Jimmy suddenly asks where Suni is. Bank looks back into the cabin and sees her still sitting inside. But moments later, rescue workers find the body of a flight attendant. Only then does Bank understand that Suni died during the chaos. The woman he saw was only her ghost. In the end, Suni finally pays the price for the choice she made 10 years ago. The movie is often said to have been inspired by the 1998 crash of Thai Airways Flight 261. There were 146 people on board. 101 were killed, while 45 survived. Investigators concluded that a combination of severe weather, repeated landing attempts, and the crew becoming disoriented caused the aircraft to lose control. The supernatural events depicted in the movie, however, are entirely fictional.